about. One, we could talk about maybe the U.S. government getting antsy. I think there's also been a lot of interesting developments around, one, and I think they tie together. I was reading recently that a lot of companies here in the U.S. are asking the U.S. government to start inputting regulation on Chinese models because we're starting to get into this cost. It almost feels like we're entering the cost era of AI now, like token maxing, token costs, how much it is, how much are people spending. And I think one of the things that people are seeing, we saw that with DeepSeek when it rocked the whole world like almost a year ago, was it was so much cheaper.
Yeah.
And I think companies now are starting to realize, hey, you know what? These Chinese models, almost like EVs, they're quite good. They can do what we need them to do.
Yeah.
They're way cheaper. Let's start using their models instead. And I think that is going to be problematic for the U.S. landscape as a whole. And that's why we're seeing companies right now push back and be like, hey, there needs to be some regulation around this, because companies are naturally going to go toward what cost, the least towards most cost effective.
Yeah.
And right now, models like Claude, OpenAI's, they're not cost effective.
They're so expensive.
And they're so expensive. And the problem is that these Chinese models are getting better and better. Now, are they probably stealing, quote unquote, stealing or using or leveraging technology that's developed here in the U.S. and chips like that? Yeah, they probably are. How legal is that? I don't know, but this isn't the first time the Chinese have done this within emerging technology. So I think it's interesting to see, and I know that we can talk. I want to like get your thoughts on that and just see like, but I think also, and it's related, right? It's cost, being cost conscious, it's model performance, right? Because I think also if we look at performance metrics now, I don't even know how much people pay attention to performance metrics anymore. Because I think Alexander Wang just came out from Facebook and said, oh, our new model is now like on par with like Chat's most recent model. Like, I don't know how much that means really anymore. So all these models are getting good.
Mm.
Now it's really about cost effectiveness. China seems to be leading the way there. There's no regulation that says these companies can't use those models. Now a ton of companies are swapping out their models and just using the Chinese ones because they're more cost effective, which in turn is going to lead to China, quote unquote, gaining more dominance.
Yeah.
Right? And is that good or bad? I don't know. I'm not on one side or the other. I don't always buy that argument either that, oh, we can't regulate things because then we'll fall behind with China. Like, what does that even mean? What does fall behind mean? Right? Like, if it's just general consumer models, maybe I'm naive. I don't see the big deal with that. Of course, if it's like private stuff, right, and stuff that could be like, maybe in a military point of view, I can understand why we don't want to fall behind. Security point of view, we don't want to fall behind, and that goes in like Fable. But so I think there's a lot of interesting points here coming along, and we're seeing almost like a re-emphasis now for regulation. But ironically, we're only seeing a re-emphasis for regulation from these American companies because they're starting to fall behind and lose. Which
it's an interesting point.
I don't know like what your thoughts are there, because like, and Trump is getting antsy with Fable 5, right? And they don't really understand it. Now they re-released it and opened it. I haven't really messed around with Fable 5 too much. I don't know if I'm the target audience for the most highest capable powers or what they're most concerned about. But I don't know what your thoughts are.
No, a few things there. So I guess first, just on the government, on the involvement with China, this is, you're describing it essentially an economic game, right? Where you have a lower opportunity, a lower cost on the China side with relatively the same capability. So we're getting back to, with AI development, and you can equate this to an iPhone camera, there's diminishing returns, right? If Apple's going to spend $100 more on a better camera that's 96 megapixels, great. No one wants that. Like 48 megapixels is more than like anyone uses. No one even uses the Pro phones like for their capabilities. That's besides the point. So there's eventually we're going to get to the point, and we might already be at the point where the differences between models are so minor that these models are not necessarily going to be incentivized to keep getting better and better, because it's the same thing. So then they're going to, you undercut costs continuously, and the less players there are, the less undercutting there is, right? So this is just a big economic game. So, and no one knows the answer until the end, which is of course subjective. So we'll see. On the China stuff specifically, it is a huge concern to allow Chinese companies to obtain data that they can train on. If anyone reads the fine print on any of these models, it basically says anything you give it will be used essentially to be trained on, especially with the amount of compute these companies have now. They've basically all scraped the entire internet. So they can scrape everything. I think Rock at this point is reading pretty much every tweet that's put out, just to put a scale on the capabilities of these models, and the compute that these companies have is just enormous. And that's only going to get larger and larger in the short term, at least. So it's a huge data privacy concern. I think it's a valid concern from the government. And it's something that there are things that we can't make in the U.S. that we rely on China for. For example, like a drone, right? I just got my DJI drone for Prime Day. It was the beginner 4K mini. It's excellent. It's amazing. It's an amazing product, but it's everything's in Chinese. Like, it's straight out of China. It's well known the U.S. can't make drones, right? So how do you rely on and this is getting to an international conflicts question and kind of moving away from AI into drones. But how do you rely on a company that you might potentially have conflict with, ongoing trade war for sure, to produce defense weapons for you?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same thing with the AI models. It's like you need to keep this industry alive in the U.S. because there will be certain rules and regulations that come out. The government is always late, but eventually it gets there. We're seeing with social media, finally, some things kind of starting to come up years and years later, although that's a different discussion for a different day. So yeah, that's my take on the China models, that it's a huge data privacy issue. We don't know what these models are training on. We also don't know where the information is coming from. So you pretty much no accountability if there's training on inappropriate things. Pivoting to Claude Fable 5, the Mythos, I used it all last week on Claude Code. It is really good. It is very good at coding, which is something that Opus has been really good at for a while. This really brings it to the next level, right? Like Opus made mistakes on 4.6, 4.7, and 4.8, and then this is just like, basically it finishes sentences for you and just goes ahead and goes off and does it. And I have a code database now for a website of it's probably close to 15, 20,000 lines of code. It is getting very complicated, so many coding files, and it navigates it beautifully and autonomously. So I'm able to go in and tell it what to do, and it does better than I expect on a lot of things within the website. So that's very, very interesting to see. But also, I'm using it obviously for something that's not like a cyber concern.
Yeah.
So if we were to have this penetrate testing a website, or a government website, I'm sure, it can find a lot of like day zero vulnerabilities, which, it's a major concern. So, it comes back to the question of like, it's really unfortunate that people just don't use these things for good. And that like, there's hackers and, people are out there that are here to exploit anything that they can, which is a little sad, honestly. But it's a really powerful model. It's an incredible tool. I think Anthropic's unbelievable. I can't believe they're as good as they are. And we've discussed this before, but like the fact that they're winning the race is, I can't believe it. I really can't believe how good of a company this is at the moment, what they've been shipping.
Yeah. I think going back to like the regulation though, I mean, because China's, just put into place like some regulations even about like, like I think there's one I read about, companies can't directly replace employees just with AI, right? I think there's one around that, and people can look it up. I think there's one that they just passed out, employer protection rights and stuff like that. So if you look at like their landscape and then if you just look at like trust surveys and stuff like that on how people feel about AI here versus how people feel about AI in China, right? We see like much more of a trust basis there. So I agree with you. There's huge data privacy concerns about, having these models come over there, but at the same time, it's who makes the right call on those data? Is it individualized and consenting just for yourself? Because we could draw parallels from TikTok, right? Like there's this whole push from the government that, TikTok is data privacy concerns. And honestly, if you ask the average user who was on those platforms, like I would say they didn't even care.
No one cares.
Yeah. So I wonder, it was kind of the same attitude with these models but I think the concern is maybe, like you said, it's not an individual user base. It's like when these companies start using it, right? And what type of data these companies have access to, and then what type of rights those companies have, right? And like, we have nothing set up like that in the US, but I know Europe with the Digital AI Act and the Omnibus, they have certain rules now, and GDPR, regulations also talk about what companies can and can't do with their data pretty explicitly, right? We don't have anything like that really set up in the US around just AI. We probably do have some internet regulation, I would assume, but I think that, I can understand the push for the US to want to regulate companies' use of AI models that are Chinese, but then at the same time, I think there needs to be, and those conversations starting about what does general regulation look like in the US to also like gain the confidence of the American people as well. Because these models should be used, right, to increase, right? We talked about the goal of AI in one of our episodes, but whatever that goal is, right? Or increase just like life quality or
utility,
I think, yeah. But there has to be some type of framework around that, right? And how our data is being used even on here, because, it can't, I think the optics can't be that, these companies can't use any cheap, cost-effective models. But at the same time, we're going to regulate that. But at the same time, we're not going to regulate anything back home, right? It's like I think the optics of that doesn't really make sense either, because at the end of the day, like if we're going to truly be a free market, you're going to operate where it makes most sense. Then, you'd operate on what is most cost effective. Now, of course, like just like with cars, we have put embargoes and tariffs on cars forever in the industry to prop up the American car industry, right? And you could do that with the models as well. I just think that there still has to be cleaner regulation around how this works, and it can't just be like, oh, we're going to pull this model for 3 weeks. Like, I wonder what the government even did with Fable 5 while they pulled it for like 3 weeks, right? And like you said, I think that most of these models probably by most people aren't being used for malicious intent. And most people probably don't even know how to use them for malicious intent.
Yeah, or not how to use them in general.
In general,
yeah,
right? Around like AI education.
Yeah.
And that's probably why we're not seeing as much utility from people in general, or even from companies, to be completely frank, right? And I think I read something as well that said that, like, smaller businesses and small companies actually benefit more from like implementing AI models, right? Because just by nature, they have less human resources and less like working power.
Yeah.
So they're able to implement models, they feel a general impact. And also people are more aligned, right? Rolling out these models across companies, large ones, can be extremely difficult because one, you have so many people, so much communication, many people working on one project, and everyone's not aligned on how that model is going to work or what it's going to do for you, right? And so I think it can be more modeled. So I mean, it goes in general into like what impact does it have on a business point of view? But I think for regulation, I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see something come out from the administration. And I know there's been, because they do seem a little antsy now on what to do, and there needs to be, well, and they need to have an understanding of it, right? Like you made the social media example, but I think that we'd be naive to wait as long as we did with social media, right?
Yeah, 100%.
People just didn't understand social media at the time. They didn't understand how data was being used. Nobody even understood that the ad or marketing space was going to be that big, right? Like or maybe like you could have inferred that, but no one even knew what like social media marketing was.
Well, yeah,
at the time.
like if someone asks where Facebook's revenue come from, it's a marketing company.
Oh, yeah, I mean their last earnings report, I think it was like unreal. Their ad,
it's all ads.
Yeah, ad spend, and like I think they even increased recently. I think it went up. I think that's why they had a great report. But yeah, so I think like all that in general plays into the government's role, and if they really do want to restrict companies from going overseas, like I think there needs to be better infrastructure at home as well than to incentivize companies to do it, right? But I mean, I guess it always going to come down to cost, like, and what these models cost. And I don't think OpenAI or Anthropic or any of these companies, I mean, they're still losing billions of dollars and are going to be incentivized to cap revenue they make or charging companies. So I think, yeah, I don't really know where we go from here, but it has to start from the top with the administration and what type of regulations they're going to put into place, and even just giving like people confidence as well that, hey, we have control of this, we're looking at this, we're thinking about how this can impact certain areas of your life, and not just something that's going to happen. Because I would argue that also progress AI further along than it is right now, right? If you don't have, like, I think it's very hard to move a technology against people, right? You want people with you when you're moving this technology.
100%.
So
yeah,
I think there's a lot there that needs to happen, and it's interesting to see like how the government, even Trump himself, who didn't really care about the regulation that long ago, is starting to get
the interesting part here too is that I know we're getting close to time here, but like the leaders of these companies are asking for regulation.
Yeah.
Like Elon Musk, who people think, oh, he's just all for AI and replacing humans. Like he has asked for a pause on AI, but essentially the current companies aren't going to collude and all pause progress on AI. It's just not going to happen. So it's an interesting point where it's like the people who actually understand this stuff are like executives at these companies, like that understand truly what they have done. So it's like, okay, if they're going to suggest regulation, would they really hurt themselves by doing it, or that it's saying this for the public appeal? Like, so who knows? Who's that player? Are they doing this out of goodwill, which they also might be. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think the technology might have to like move along further, and if we really do see it start to replace like a ton of people, I think that might be like the point where people really start calling for it. But that might be also when we're a little too late. So, but it's often like see it to believe it, and I think people in general are still kind of in the see it to believe it phase of this technology, like really impacting or taking their jobs. And I think once it does, that's when people start screaming for help.
Yeah, I think just to close up on a prediction here, like the sector that will be affected the most by an AI model for job replacement, in my opinion, is self-driving cars in the next year or two. It's going to be profound paradigm shift, like insane, like to be like beyond belief, in my opinion. What this will do, low cost AVs, autonomous vehicles. That's the first like exact replacement over what a human does, and like the work that's done on like Excel and accounting and like finance. Like there is some subjectivity to it. Like someone has to interpret the results that the AI gives. Like if the car can drive safe, or the truck can drive safe, that is going to be major.
Yeah, I also think like Amazon's investments into robotics in like their factories and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And will just continue to hit hard. I know that
Hugely underrated, by the
that
way.
report that they came out with almost a year ago today, right? Talked about the projections that they were going to be laying off millions of people.
Yeah.
Which was, I think if anyone wants to look it up, just look up like Amazon robotics projection or something like that. You'll find the article. I think it was New York Times reported on it. So I think that's another area you have to watch, because I know Amazon have ambitious goals to try to reduce headcount.
Yeah.
It's possible to automate a lot of that stuff, which I know a lot of stuff's already been automated, but you can continue to get, efficient, effective workers that do the same thing every single day or every repeat time task.
If it can move atoms reliably, self-driving cars, Amazon warehouse robots, humanoid robots eventually, that's a huge replacement for humans.
Yeah, exactly, man. But we'd hopefully want regulation before all these things happen. And that's what I'm saying, not after. Yeah. So that's where we'd want to be at. But that was some of my thoughts.
Interesting times. That's for sure. Awesome. Anything else to add?
No, that's it. I think we can close the episode out.
I know we're at time here, so thanks for joining. We'll be back hopefully on a more regular cadence here going forward. But touching on Tech Week, and then recent news on AI and government was the topics of the day. So
cool.
Awesome. Thanks very much.
Peace.
Bye.
No, it should just.